Today, I will tell you about the story of Victoria Eugenie, the great-grandmother of the current King of Spain, Felipe VI, and once the Queen of Spain. Her life went through many twists and turns, but ultimately returned to tranquility, leaving only some legendary experiences for posterity to savor in detail. Princess Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg was born in 1887 at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, with the full name Victoria Eugenie Julia Aina. Her mother was Princess Beatrice, the youngest daughter of Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and Prince Albert, while her father was Prince Henry of Battenberg. She was named after her grandmother, Queen Victoria, and Empress Eugenie of France, but her family usually called her Aina. She was born in the 50th year of her grandmother Queen Victoria's reign, and thus was also known as the Jubilee baby. When Princess Beatrice, the mother of Princess Victoria Eugenie, was very young, her father, Prince Albert, passed away. Queen Victoria began to rely on the companionship of Princess Beatrice amidst her immense grief, an abnormal emotional dependence that made her reluctant to let her daughter marry and leave. Eventually, she agreed to her daughter's marriage to Prince Henry of Battenberg on the condition that her daughter would still be her full-time companion and private secretary. Therefore, Princess Victoria Eugenie grew up in Queen Victoria's household, spending her childhood at Windsor Castle, Balmoral Castle, and Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. This was her last few years of comfortable life. In 1901, the aged Queen Victoria passed away, marking the end of an era for the nation. And for Victoria Eugenie, this meant that she had to say goodbye to her happy childhood. After the Queen's death, Princess Beatrice's position in the court was diminished. She was her mother's confidant, but was not close enough to her brother Edward, who succeeded to the throne. So when Edward VII ascended to the throne, Beatrice could only move into Kensington Palace to live with her children. As the young girl grew up day by day, Victoria Eugenie became increasingly the center of attention. She was tall and well-proportioned, with a pretty oval face, and she had received a good education at court. Clearly, such a girl was not lacking in admirers. In 1905, the 19-year-old King Alfonso XIII of Spain visited various European countries, and there was a rumor that Alfonso XIII was looking for a bride for himself. Alfonso was the posthumous child of the previous king, born to be king. And indeed, he was looking for a suitable lady to be his wife. People generally believed that Princess Patricia of Connaught was his intended target, and they were arranged to sit together at dinner parties. Unexpectedly, Alfonso's gaze fell directly upon Victoria Eugenie, and he couldn't help but ask, "Who is that young lady with the light golden hair?" At the ball the next day, Alfonso saw Victoria Eugenie again and watched the attractive blonde intently before approaching her to strike up a conversation. Alfonso had a limited English vocabulary, and Victoria Eugenie did not speak Spanish, so the two of them chatted awkwardly in French. Afterwards, Alfonso enthusiastically invited Victoria Eugenie to dance and asked her while dancing, "How about I send you some postcards? Oh, please don't say no to me." At that time, many noble girls enjoyed collecting postcards from different countries and regions, and Victoria Eugenie graciously accepted. Just like that, the two fell in love. After the trip to London, Alfonso began to send postcards to the girl he loved, which then developed into an exchange of letters. The two of them fell deeper and deeper in love, both starting to consider the possibility of taking their relationship further. Victoria Eugenie began to try to learn Spanish, while Alfonso told his mother, Maria Cristina of Austria, that he wanted to marry Victoria Eugenie. Maria Cristina was not pleased with her son's choice. Firstly, Victoria Eugenie was a Protestant, while Spain was a devout Catholic country, so there was a mismatch in terms of religion. Secondly, and what worried Maria Cristina the most, was the possibility that she might bring hemophilia into Spain. Victoria Eugenie's brother Leopold was a hemophiliac, so there was a 50% chance that she might be a carrier, but the extent of the risk was not yet clear. If Alfonso married her, their offspring might be affected by this disease. Thus, Maria Cristina told her son that she did not think Victoria Eugenie was a suitable choice, but Alfonso, who had fallen in love, would not listen to his mother's advice, and Maria Cristina was powerless to stop her son's decision. The following year, Alfonso saw his beloved girl again in the seaside town of Biarritz in the southwest of France. There, the two became unofficially engaged. On May 24, 1906, Victoria Eugenie arrived in France aboard a British warship, and then took a special train to Spain. At the Spanish border, Princess Victoria Eugenie was welcomed by the Spanish Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The Madrid Royal Palace was abuzz with people's voices. A portion of Spaniards came to Madrid from their hometowns, dressed in bright clothes, holding flowers and fine wines, and cheering loudly with smiles on their faces, "Long live the King! Long live the Queen!" Afterwards, envoys from various countries arrived in Madrid, bringing with them exquisite gifts and good wishes, plunging the entire capital into a frenzy of celebration. On the day of the wedding, Victoria Eugenie wore a wedding dress sewn by the finest tailor in Madrid, with a tiara of irises, a wedding gift from Alfonso, gracefully appearing before everyone. By her side, Alfonso XIII was dressed in the uniform of a marshal of the Spanish army, adorned with the Order of the Golden Fleece. The two boarded a royal carriage pulled by 8 white horses, and the wedding procession set off from the palace. The cheering crowds were neatly lined up on both sides of the road, and it seemed as though the entire populace of Madrid was excitedly cheering. The royal monastery of San Geronimo was splendidly decorated. In the presence of God, the newlywed couple completed their ceremony, which concluded with the ambassador of the Roman Curia announcing blessings for the newlyweds. Afterwards, the two left the church, boarded the royal carriage, and passed through the streets back to the royal palace. Just as they were enjoying the cheers and blessings of the surrounding crowd, tragedy struck. A bomb, hidden within a bouquet, was thrown at the royal carriage. The bomb exploded next to the king and queen's carriage, and the massive explosion was accompanied by the screams of the crowd, the frantic scattering of people, and the groans of the injured, casting a bloody shadow over the wedding day. This bomb caused 23 deaths and injured more than 100 people. Perhaps even the gods were foreshadowing the tragedy of this marriage, but they had no other choice but to pretend not to care and keep going. The king's wedding cast a shadow over the hearts of every Spaniard and made Victoria Eugenie's nuptials far from joyful. Alfonso was preoccupied with the arrest of the culprits, while his mother, Maria Cristina, scrutinized her daughter-in-law with a critical eye. She had not liked Victoria Eugenie before, and now she liked her even less. Victoria Eugenie was very lonely, her Spanish was not good, her husband was busy, and her mother-in-law was constantly causing trouble. Fortunately, in the autumn of 1906, she became pregnant. Things began to take a turn for the better. In any royal family, the continuation of the bloodline is a matter of paramount importance. Some of the Spanish noblewomen who previously disapproved of her started to greet her with smiles. What brought even greater joy was that Victoria Eugenie gave birth to a male heir, who was named Alfonso after his father. Just 1 year after her marriage, Victoria Eugenie had produced an heir, winning over the hearts of many Spaniards who had initially been skeptical of her. Even Maria Cristina began to soften her attitude. Unfortunately, Victoria Eugenie's happiness was short-lived, as she would soon be struck by a cruel twist of fate.